Preliminary, first report of multiple. I don't need to get no praises, but I told y'all, I know what I be talking about.
Can you all hear me just fine, and particularly the folks in the back of the room? All right. First and foremost, I want to just emphasize a couple points that Trustee House and others have made. First of all, thank you to the trustees, to Madam Clerk, to Mike McGrath and Bert Odelson. This has been a challenging investigation, to say the least, because we have not received the level of cooperation from the mayor and her team that I would have hoped. Nonetheless, we've had, I think, a breakthrough that's allowed us to be here in front of you today to give you the information that I know the trustees for sure and the members of the public have been seeking for some time. But I do want to emphasize this is just preliminary. We have more work to do, but as Trustee House said, we believe that it was very important to come before the members of the public so you would have some context for what the current state of your finances are as city government. As has been alluded to, I think there's going to have to be some tough decisions that are made, but you've got to make that with as complete a set of information as possible, and that's what this presentation is intended to do. Our work is ongoing, and we expect to finish with in expedited fashion, but as I said, we wanted to get to you as quickly as possible. A couple of points, just so we're all, I'm not an accountant, and I suspect many of you in the room are not, but we will be covering some accounting terms and wanted to just make sure that everybody had the same basic level of understanding as we go through these slides. We're going to talk about how the Village of Dalton handles its accounting system. We'll talk about in length, in detail, about the preliminary assessment of the financial status. We're going to go over what we've seen as increasing expenditures since 2021, unfunded expenditures, the current cash status, credit card use. Then we'll do a summary, and then we'll entertain questions from the trustees. So let me just jump right into it. Many of you know that the village, in the same manner as other municipalities in the state, accounts for its finances using what's called fund accounting. That means, that's just a fancy word of saying the expenses and the revenues are divided up into specific buckets of dollars, and those funds are what we're going to be talking about. The village maintains three categories of fund: a general governmental fund, the proprietary fund, and a fiduciary fund. All right. Under each category, actually, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Amanda, who will go into more detail about these different funds. Go ahead, Amanda. Sorry about that.
So within each category,
I have to talk a little louder.
there we go. So within each category of funds, there are underlying funds that are used to account for resources that are for different purposes. The first category, governmental funds, includes the general fund, which is going to be the focus of our presentation this evening. And the general fund is what's used to account for the day-to-day operations of the village. Additionally, there are what are known as special revenue funds. These are specific funds for specific purposes. This includes the motor fuel tax and TIF money. The final governmental fund is debt service funds, where the village's debt obligations are accounted for, which is primarily the public bond debt. The final two categories of funds, which we will not be covering today, are proprietary funds, which account for transactions that are more business in nature, operations that should be funded by customer payments. That's the water fund, the sewer fund, and the fitness center. And the final are fiduciary funds, which are held for non-governmental parties, and that is the village's pension trust fund.
So let's jump into the specifics. Many of you know that the village's fiscal year runs from May 1 to April 30th. So it's those 12 months, but they spanned 2 years. Certain financial disclosures are mandated under state law that the village reports to the comptroller of the state each fiscal year. Two documents that we're going to talk specifically about are the annual financial report, and you see the citation there, it's a state law, and the audited financial statements. The village has not, and let me repeat that, the village has not complied with these statutory requirements since fiscal year 2021. There's no annual financial report available after 2021, and no audited financial statements after 2021. So what that means is the information that we're providing you has not been thoroughly audited by a CPA, but we do have information coming from an entity that essentially serves as the finance department of the village. Historically, from what we can tell, the village has had small or no full-time financial staff. At various times, even though statutorily there's a provision for a city treasurer, none exists and hasn't for some time. There's a provision for a finance director. There's been intermittent people that have served that role, but that role has been vacant as of May of this year, and before that, the person who held the role started working part-time as of the end of December in 2023. So as you can see, given the lean or no financial staff, there's a lot of dependence upon the John Kasparic accounting firm, which has functionally operated as the village's finance department for some time. What we have examined are monthly financial reports from January of 2021 to May of 2024, produced by the Kasparic firm. And as I mentioned, due to the village's failure to conduct an audited financial statement, we have to caveat the accuracy of the information, but we feel fairly confident based upon lining out not only the monthly reports, but looking at bank statements that match up with the information that's in the financial reports. And we've had the opportunity to talk to some of the folks at the Kasparic firm who are responsible for managing the finances of the village, and that work is ongoing. As of May 30th of this year, the village's general fund was in a net deficit position, meaning that there is insufficient funds in that general fund. As we mentioned, the general fund is used to account for the majority of the village's day-to-day operations, including payroll and vendor payments. The village's special revenue fund and debt service fund, however, are in a positive position, but each of those funds are restricted funds, meaning you cannot borrow from one to give to the other. And that is what's causing, in part, the financial crisis. What's next you can see is a graphic that depicts where we started as of April, where the village started as of April of 22, with positive of $5.6 million in the general fund, and where we are as of May of 2024, which is a negative $3.65 million.
Mayor Lightfoot, if I may,
Yes, sir.
just kind of as a summary now, just quick numbers. So in a 2-year span, we're talking about a $9 million swing or $9 million of deficit over that course of time. Would that be
Yes,
close
sir.
accurate?
Yes, sir.
She fried.
Yep. All right, turning now to the increasing expenditures of the village.
She fried.
Over the last 3 fiscal years, the average monthly expenditures of the village have increased by nearly 30%. As you can see in the graphic, in fiscal year 2022, on average, the village spent about $1.9 million a month. But in the last fiscal year, that amount had climbed to $2.5 million.
A month?
These increasing expenditures have not been accompanied by corresponding increases in revenue. Again, as you see in the graph on the blue bars, the revenues have remained relatively the same over that time period, just over $24 million, while expenditures have climbed from $23 million in 2022 to $30 million in 2024. Ultimately, in fiscal years 2023 and 2024, expenditures exceeded revenue. Specifically in 2024, it was over $5 million more in expenditures than revenues. To look further at the increasing expenditures, the table on the screen highlights the two village departments that are the main drivers of this spending increase: the General Administration and Administrative Compensation Department and the Police Department.
Wait, go back.
Turning first to the General Administration Department, line, the increase in expenditures here has grown about approximately 47%. This was around $6.4 million in fiscal year 2022, and it was $9.4 million in fiscal year 2024. There have been increases in general administration spending in nearly every area, but there are a handful that stick out the most. As you can see on the first line, the largest driver of this increase is a more than double change in liability insurance cost. It's gone from $1.2 million in fiscal year 2022 to $3.2 million in fiscal year 2024. Other areas where we see large increases are miscellaneous expenditures, settlements, legal fees, and telephone.
Let me just add regarding the legal fees. These are, everything that we're representing to you tonight are things that have been booked in one of the general ledgers or otherwise. We know that the legal fees that have been booked so far are underestimated because there are a number of legal fees that have yet to be paid. And obviously, with the litigation that's been filed, particularly by vendors who have not been paid, those legal fees will definitely, this is a very conservative estimate of what those fees actually are. Let me drill a little bit down also in what we're seeing so far with the police department. Those expenditures have increased approximately 21% since FY '22. Some of that is obviously driven by the union contracts and making sure that there's retro pay and that the police officers are compensated according to the collective bargaining agreement. Within the police department expenditures, categories with large increases include overtime, other miscellaneous expenses, and I will tell you we don't know exactly what that is, but we're working on unpacking that, contractual services, other professional services, and medical insurance. We wanted to highlight for you, particularly given overtime, what we saw as two outliers in officers, Officer Terry Young and Officer William Reed. Both of these individuals in the last 2 years have earned more in overtime than their base compensation. And you can see these numbers here. Officer Terry Young in FY 2023 earned $194,290 total, given the base salary and the overtime. And then in FY 2024, that increased to $227,351, combining the base salary and the overtime. Officer Reed for FY 2023 had a total earnings of $145,450, and in FY 2024, $192,732. We thought it also important for you to know that Acting Chief Lacey has accumulated overtime.
Okay.
It's our understanding that he is not part of the collective bargaining unit and has not been for some time, which under normal circumstances would mean that he is not entitled to overtime. But as you can see here, for FY '22, FY '23, and FY '24, and we're now in fiscal year 2025. Through those 4 years, he's accumulated $215,747,000 just in overtime.
In overtime. She got it. I could not get it.
Now we're going to move, ladies and gentlemen, to unfunded expenditures. And this is really focused on, as we alluded to, we're going to move to unfunded expenditures